We'll begin our study of Texas this year by trying to imagine how Texas used to be millions of years ago. How did early Texans decide where to live? They usually picked a place where they could meet their basic needs. You remember that basic needs are food, clothing, and shelter. When people first settled in Texas, they wanted to live close to water. This was the most important thing they needed to survive. Many of the plants and animals needed for food also lived near the water. Materials from these plants and animals were also used to make clothes and build homes. That is why many settlements in Texas were on rivers or along the coasts. We call settlements that are close together clusters. Living near a river gave early people an easy way to travel. American Indians and settlers used rivers, large creeks, and the coast as a liquid highway. Living close to a waterway also made it easier for them to trade goods with other settlements. Later in Texas history, some settlers found other ways to meet their needs for water. They dug shallow wells. These wells meant they did not have to live close to a river. When people learned how to drill deep into the earth to reach water, they moved farther away from rivers. As railroads were built, people also settled near railroads. Railroads made it easier to receive and ship goods. Wherever people settled, they formed communities. Communities provided safety on the frontier. Living in a community helped people meet their needs for friendship and help in times of trouble. Texas did not have large cities in the beginning. Most people lived in small communities and worked as farmers, ranchers, hunters, or fishermen. Since there were very few stores, they made most of the things they needed. Families made their own clothes, their own furniture, and even their own homes. Sometimes they bought or traded goods to get the things they could not make. Over time, more and more people moved to Texas. Some small towns became cities like Houston, San Antonio, and El Paso. The discovery of electricity and inventions like the light bulb were first available in these cities. This made the cities popular places to live. Other new inventions created jobs, and most of these jobs were in cities. Families left their farms and ranches and moved to the cities for these new jobs. They also wanted to enjoy the modern conveniences cities offered. A convenience is something that makes life easier. When Texas cities grew even larger, many people wanted to leave the crowded cities and go back to smaller communities. By then, most areas outside of the cities had electricity. These small communities also had good roads that made driving to the cities easier. People discovered it was possible to live in less crowded areas and still drive to their jobs in the cities. Something else helped Texas grow. Texas is a good place for people to find jobs. It is also a place where people find their basic needs at a reasonable price. This is because Texas practices free enterprise. Free enterprise means that the government does not control how people operate their businesses. And that means businesses have to compete for customers. To get new customers, businesses will work harder to give the best service and the best products. When businesses compete, prices are lower and quality is higher. That is good news for consumers in Texas. As you can see, Texas has the resources people need to survive. It also has a long history of practicing free enterprise. These are two important reasons why people choose to make Texas home. Finding a big state in a big world. Finding Texas is like observing an object in a science activity. You begin by looking at the object with the naked eye. Let's begin by looking at the top half of the Earth. This half is the northern hemisphere. The bottom half is the southern hemisphere. The line that divides these hemispheres is the equator. Texas is in the northern hemisphere. This means that Texas is north of the equator. Next, picture the Earth sliced in two equal halves from top to bottom. The halves are called the eastern and western hemispheres. North America is in the western hemisphere. Since Texas is part of North America, it is in the western hemisphere. Imagine taking a closer look at the Earth using a hand lens. This time, we will look for the continent of North America. When you have found North America, you are close to finding Texas. Now imagine looking for Texas through a microscope. With the power lens, we will find the southern half of North America. Most of this land is the United States of America. Texas is one of its 50 states. With so many states, how do we find Texas? The United States is divided into geographic regions. A geographic region is an area of land with similar land features and climate. It can also have similar plants and animals. Texas is found in the southwestern part of the United States. Using a stronger lens on our imaginary microscope, we see that Texas borders the country of Mexico. Another important Texas border is the Gulf of Mexico. Oklahoma borders Texas to the north. New Mexico borders us to the west, and Louisiana borders us to the east. Arkansas borders a small piece of northeast Texas. Looking at Texas in these different ways helps us to understand our state's place in the world. As we end our search, we now know how to find Texas on any map or globe.
Before it became a part of the United States, Texas was ruled over by many other countries. Spain was the first European country to stake a claim to the Texas territory. Next came France, then Mexico. After the Texas Revolution, Texas became its own independent republic. Finally, in 1845, Texas joined the Union as the 28th state of the United States of America. All these people brought their different cultures with them, and all these different traditions live on in the Texas we know today. The culture of the American cowboys who settled Texas in the 19th century can be seen in rodeos, where trained men and women rope, race, and ride bucking broncos and bulls. Texas' delicious barbecue comes from the African culture, and also from the German and Czech settlers who learned to smoke their meat for storage. Each region of Texas has its own style of barbecue originating from the local culture. Like the barbecue, the combination of these different cultures gives Texas its own unique flavor. No matter where you go, there's no place else on earth quite like it.